A reading from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to the opening of the prison for those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. The fulfillment of this scripture, as you have heard it, is today. This is the year of the Lord's favor. This is a year of jubilee, a year the poor, the brokenhearted, the captive, and the blind are offered redemption. Here, now.
Jesus, please explain why you stopped the reading before Isaiah spoke of the day of vengeance of our God.
The day of vengeance is in the future. If you do not realize that you need a year of the Lord's favor, then I cannot save you.
Everybody, this is a very, very special interview. I do talk about finance. I talk about precious metals, gold and silver. I talk about the dollar. And as I've been speaking about this for the past few years, people have been sending me a gentleman by the name of Chris Reed. And I have Chris Reed today on the show. We're going to talk about a lot of prophetic words that he's gotten, received, and also we're going to touch upon his $50 bill prophecy that he received. And we're going to just talk and see what comes up and see what the Holy Spirit wants to add to this. But there's a lot to talk about. So Chris, thank you for being here.
Well, it's an honor to be with you. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's start off let's just get right into the $50 bill prophecy, because from what I recall on it, that you would see a devaluation of the $50 bill, which I've been saying as well too, and I see how this is going to play out. And then I want to have you expound on that. But basically, there's supposed to be two haircuts to the $50 bill. So basically, it was going to go down by, because what God revealed to me, and preface this, is by the end of the decade, the dollar system, the paper money, the fiat money system will be worth zero. But it's going to be worth less, and then worthless. And when I heard what your prophetic word was, like, wow, that's incredible, because that's exactly what I've been saying for all these years. It's going to be worth less, which would be a 30%-ish haircut. Another then worth less again, another 30%, and ultimately worthless. And so, and God revealed to me from a biblical prophetic time point that would potentially be into the end of this decade. So Chris, go ahead, add whatever, to tell us what God, revealed to you, through prophetic, and I'm all ears.
Well, I'll just start off by saying I agree. Just an initial comment. This is one of the reasons, and I'm sure you know this far better than I, is that this is why for the last 15, 20 years, the president and the federal government have not been concerned about balancing the budget or coming up with a budget, because I think all along the globalists have been aiming for the destruction of the dollar, which is why the talks of the debt ceiling and continuously raising it without cuts in spending, it seems like that they haven't really cared. It almost seems intentional.
Yes.
And I think that that's the reality of it. I think that it is intentional. That's why they haven't cared about reining in spending. Let me just share, if I can, the $50 bill dream first. This was first shared. I shared it publicly in March of 2022. So well over a year ago, I shared it publicly for Morningstar here, where I minister, and on my YouTube channel. But it's March 25th, 2022. I had this dream up in a place called Moravian Falls, North Carolina. And our ministry has some property up there, and we have one of our churches up there. And I was just going up there to minister. And so while I was up there, I dreamed, and I'll just read you the dream. I saw an unknown man dressed in a black suit hold a $50 bill in his hand, and he tore the $50 bill in three stages. Number one, he stayed in front of me. He took the $50 bill and tore off 1/3 of the $50 bill. And when he did, random people started coming up to me and bringing me national newspapers, one right after the other, with headlines being that all that I could see on those newspapers. And I remembered them vividly. The first one that was given to me after 1/3 of it was torn off of the $50 bill said this, quote, "The dollar drops 30% in value," unquote. And there was a subtitle which read, quote, "Mideast oil strikes deal with China instead of the US," unquote. I then saw another headline given to me which said, quote, "The perfect storm," unquote, subtitled, "Inflation reaches a new high." I was handed another headline which said, quote, "Food shortage crisis as wheat and bread imports are at a stalemate," unquote. Another headline was handed to me which said something like, quote, "Riots and civil unrest as citizens demand entitlement checks," unquote. That was the only one that I couldn't remember the exact wording of, but it was very, very close to how I read it. The second stage of the dream, I saw the man dressed in black again with the $50 bill, and this time he tore it right in half. So first he tears off a third, and then he takes what's left of it, tears it in half. And when he did, an earthquake happened under my feet. And another person walks up, hands me a headline which read, quote, "Israeli and Palestinian two-state solution reached," unquote. Another headline was handed to me by another person which read, quote, "Major earthquake hits the middle of the US," unquote. Then the man in black in the third stage took the rest of the $50 bill and started tearing it into smaller pieces one by one. And another person walks up and hands me another headline which read, quote, "America in pieces," unquote, subtitled, quote, "More states secede from the nation in rebellion to the federal government," unquote. I was handed another headline which said, quote, "U.S. military takes charge as uncertainty looms over the federal government," unquote. Then the man in black took out a new dollar bill. But it was interesting because this new dollar bill looked like a cell phone, like an iPhone.
Digital.
But it was a $1 bill, and I did see George Washington's face on it, of course, just like the current $1 bill, but it looked very different. And I remember looking at this $1 bill that looked like a cell phone, and somebody else came up and handed me another newspaper headline which read, quote, "New currency for a renewed nation," unquote. And then another headline was handed to me, and it was the last one, which said, quote, "Simplicity restored as Americans grow their own food again," unquote. And so, as I told you, and I'll quickly share this. Of course, we have a team here. I sat down with the team here, and then, we also worked with a man named John Redenbow and different others and intelligence groups as we've worked with counterterrorism and all that. And one of the things that they said was that there was language in this dream that only if you were in the intelligence world you would understand. It would trigger you. So this was a very intense dream. I'll just give you my interpretation of it, a quick version of it. There are so many events that, of course, are happening in the world right now that could cause a perfect storm. And I think this dream will progress over a period of time. I don't know the exact period of time, months, years, but it looks like it's going to start in the near future. When I had this dream, none of this was, in the news headlines. It really, as far as the inflation and a lot of that stuff, the food supply chain shortages that started after that. And so the word that I got was preparation, in the sense that the word preparation was going to be taking on a new meaning in the days to come. And so I know, as Paul the Apostle said, we know in part, we prophesy in part. So I don't pretend as if I have the whole. But if I bring my part and you bring your part and somebody else brings their part, then I think we can make a better piece of the full picture. And so this is just my part. I want to make that clear. The man in black, as dreams are often parabolic and metaphorical. This is a unique interpretation, and I think it will fit, but I think that there are some unique pieces to this that make it altogether all more fitting. The man in the black suit. Well, when you think of that, the man in black, the first thing that comes to your mind, if you're an American, is Johnny Cash. How
Yes.
ironic. The man in black has the last name Cash. And of course, the $50 bill being torn in three stages seems to be the monetary value of the 50 United States, and the devaluing of the dollar, the petrodollar. Also, what's interesting about Johnny Cash is he's the man in black, but the black horse rider in Revelation chapter 6, the black horse, pertain to economic principles. In fact, it says in Revelation 6, a measure of wheat for a penny. So, in other words, the US $50 bill, as I said, represents the economic condition of the US. And Johnny Cash had some interesting song titles. And, the Lord can speak in ways that sometimes, frustrate the religious mind, right? He speaks our language, what we understand. I call it the prophetic filter. Johnny Cash wrote a few titled songs, such as When the Man Comes Around. He wrote another song entitled The Man in White. Another thing we also found out was Johnny Cash joined the military in the 1950s, and his first job, and people can look this up, in the Air Force, he was a decoder, meaning he decoded information and translated, which is kind of what dream interpretation is. So a quick summary, it seems like the bill, as it was torn in three stages, escalated a series of events. The tearing off of 1/3 of the bill triggered a headline of the dollar dropping 30%, which is about 1/3 in value. And this seemed to be tied to a Middle East and oil deal
With China.
With China. Yeah. And then it seems the deal seemed to hurt the dollar, which led to more economic strain, high inflation, the perfect storm, and then food shortage, supply chain issues, which of course, a lot of people know this, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. And there's a lot of bread that comes from there. And so because of the war that's going on there, no matter how somebody feels about it, the fact is a lot of the harvest, the seed time and harvest cycles have been interrupted. So that's going to affect wheat, bread, and so on and so forth. These issues will then trigger the next headline: Americans demand assistance and welfare. And so then he tears the bill in half, which seemed to trigger or be a result of America supporting a two-state solution of Israel and basically dividing Jerusalem in half. And it seemed like that when this happened, there was an earthquake that hit the middle of the U.S. It was like, if you're going to split my city, Jerusalem, I'm going to let, I don't know to the degree of the earthquake, but that it would hit the middle of the U.S.
Let's talk about the first tearing of the dollar bill. When I heard your dream, the initial thing that I honestly heard and believe to be as the man in black would be what's called the deep state or the puppet masters, because they work in the shadows. And who are the deeps? Mystery Babylon. And so it's a deep state who is Mystery Babylon with origins, bloodlines all the way to Cain and Adam, add right to the garden, right? They work in the shadows, pulling the strings of world leaders to control the seven mountains, to control the world. Church,
Yeah.
family, finance, government, entertainment, media. But finance is the key here. That's why the financial system is what they've used to control all of humanity, because they create money out of thin air. It's really what it is. They create money out of thin air. And that's why they don't care about these debt ceilings, because all they do is click a button and they make more money. Like when the stock market crashed in the year 2020, do you realize in April, first off, that was predictable by the cycles. So we predicted the crash to the exact month. Stock market crashes 38%. And then that weekend, the third weekend of March, they create $7 trillion over the weekend, push it back in the stock market, and everything's fixed. You see, the whole world is based on smoke and mirrors, and is controlled in the shadows by these puppet masters, which are guys wearing, these black suits. So, they're work in the shadows. That's why they're black. But ultimately, their goal is to enslave and control humanity, and it's all based on the money. That's why when you go back and study history in terms of time, you'll understand that from a mathematical standpoint, it's 1971. You'll like this chart right here. Look what happened in 71. See, Nixon takes us off the gold standard in 71. It took like 100 years. We only had a $500 billion in 100 years. And then 71, Nixon takes us off the gold standard. Look at them. This is all just money out of thin air. This is just money out of thin air. And so they've used this money that we believe to be money, but what it is, it's an enslavement system, no different than what Pharaoh in the time of Israel, right? They've enslaved us and they control us through the money. So if God's going to destroy
Yep.
Babylon, right? So what we're stepping into, this is like kind of some stuff you may find fascinating, but what God revealed to me is, the Isaiah 61 moment when Jesus Christ walked in the temple, he read, the Spirit of the Lord is a God is upon me. He has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted, to proclaim the captives will be released and the prisoners will be freed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And he stopped. He stopped. And he says, this prophecy is fulfilled, or the scripture is fulfilled as it was read. He never read the day of vengeance of our God. And so what we're seeing, so talked about the puppet masters, right? That's the Daniel 2 prophecy. See, Mystery Babylon in our generation became Babylon. Daniel 2 prophecy in our generation, I believe, turned into Mystery Babylon because they work in the shadows. They pull the strings of world leaders. And all the whole prophecies happened so far. The whole entire Daniel prophecy as of manifest, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, papacy, everything has happened, but we haven't seen the last one. While you were watching Daniel 2 verse 34, while you were watching a stone carved out, so we get to watch this, a stone carved out by no human hand. I mean, God's going to get the glory on this, Chris.
Yeah.
You know that God's going to get the glory on this event, comes in and destroys Mystery Babylon. And so we go from here, but this is my understanding of time, what God revealed to me just most recently. And that's kind of why I wanted to have you on the show, because it's Daniel 12, verse 7. God actually tells us how long they have. So when Corona came on scene, the first diagnosed case was in January of 2020. And so God tells us here in Daniel 12, verse 7, it will be. Right here, it will be for a time, which is 360 days, times, which is 2 years, and then a half a year and a half a time. So 3.5 years. If we run the cycle from when Corona comes on scene, takes us to the end of June. So you were saying, in your heart, you feel this event is coming extremely soon. I'm just telling you, based on when you read Daniel 12, verse 7, it looks like that first tear in the dollar bill is going to happen anytime between now into the end of June, because if evil loses its power, right? How did they get their power? Using the money.
Yeah.
That's why you've had people reach out to you, because it's a very powerful prophecy, because when you know the truth, when you hear the truth, you know it. And when people heard your prophetic word, it freaked them out because it was the truth. And so when they heard it, they're like, whoa, we got to go talk. We got to go talk to you because you spoke the truth. And so the time calculations on that are screaming that this is about to go down. That's why you feel it in your spirit. This is very close. And we see the evil people, how they really, from when Corona came on scene, you got to admit, right? This was nothing but an evil enterprise of what's been going on here. But it's interesting when read Daniel 12 verse 7, it says they get a season. They get 1,260 days. They get 3.5 years. And interestingly enough, you also brought up, Revelation, and it's the third seal. The third seal of Revelation. I think this is the one you quoted just a few minutes ago. But the third seal of Revelation specifically is what, right? It's a rider on a horse, right here,
Mm-hmm.
right? What is the rider sitting on? What color horse, right? There's your black
Black.
jacket, your black horse. And the rider's got scales in his hands. Well, there's your answer right there. The financial system. There it is. The financial. What did Jesus Christ do when he walked into the temple?
Yeah.
He flipped the tables on who? The money changers, right? So why is the third seal of Revelation, the rider's got scales in his hands? No different than what happened with Jesus Christ. That's the only time in the Bible that he was, righteous anger, right? And where else did you see the word scales? This is the part you're going to really appreciate as well too. Mene tekel upharsin, when Daniel had to cut the writing on the wall. You have
Yep.
been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom has come to an end.
That's right. That's pretty profound. Yeah, that the writing on the wall, the mysterious hand,
Yeah.
um, that the astrologers even didn't have figured out, but the prophetic did.
Right. Yeah. Same thing with the Daniel interpretation, Daniel prophecy, right? What did Nebuchadnezzar say to all the prophets and soothsayers? You either interpret my dream, which I'm not going to tell you what dream I had. You either interpret it or I'm going to kill you all. Why? What do I need you if you can't interpret my dreams or tell me what it is, right? And what happened again? Daniel stepped up to the plate, right? And the prophetic
Yep.
came to pass.
That you just brought that up. That's something very dear to me because that's something that the Lord is, and I say this humbly, He's allowed me to. There have been many times as I've ministered, I've called people out and seen their dreams they had the night before, not just interpreted, but see their dream and then interpret it. And this started happening, and there's a lot of services and clips where that's happened in people that I didn't know, and they confirmed it. And I asked the Lord, why is this seeming to be happening so much? It's because it's a Daniel 2 moment.
Yeah.
And it's just like when Jesus told the woman at the well, remember, he said, go call your husband. She said, I have no husband. He said, you've said, well, you have no husband. You've had 5. The one you're with is not your husband. And then she said, um, sir, I perceive you're a prophet. And then she went on down to say these words, we know when Messiah comes, he will tell us all things. That's in John 4. So she
Yes.
associated the first coming of Christ with prophetic revelation, telling us all things, revealing the secrets of the heart, like he did telling her about her marriage life and all of that, not to shame her, but to, address the area of her heart that was bringing her hurt and harm. I
Yes.
think that same sign is going to associate with the second coming. I do. The revealing of the secrets of the heart and the prophetic is going to escalate and go to a higher place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's the thing, and God does, this is one thing that, which I find fascinating because God does nothing before first speaking to Amos, right? Before first speaking through his servants, the prophets. Why did Father give you that? Why did he give you the dream about the dollar, right? Very simple, because he's revealing his secrets, and then also
Yep.
it says in the Bible, the glory of God is to conceal a matter, and the glory of kings to search it out, right? So,
Yep.
just by you going, he gave you a matter, and you have now been trying to search it out, and you've got some really incredible revelation on it, right? Just the fact it's a $50 bill, right? 50 states, right? Like there's so many revelations that God, he gave you the prophetic dream, but then you're trying to interpret it, right? And so it's incredible, but our job is to try to interpret these because, we all see in part,
Yeah.
but as we're in Revelation, what is revelation? It's reveal. we're being, and every day there's more revelation. There's more reveal. And
Yep,
it's
that's
interesting,
right.
just like on what I notice and what I discover and what God shows me is how when biblical things happen, when God intervenes, are happening on specific dates. So just like some fun stuff for you to think about, right? So Tucker goes and reveals all the J6 videos. Do you realize he did it on Purim? He did it on Purim. And you know that there are no coincidences in the Bible, right? Because if God designed it, then it happened. It was supposed to happen on Purim. But we would call it a coincidence, but it wasn't. It was by design. So another one, right? Ascension. This was May 18th, last week. Okay. So we know Pentecost is coming here on the 28th, this weekend, Sunday, right? That's Pentecost. Well, what happened 10 days before? Ascension. Well, what a coincidence that three, the Trinity, whistleblowers are sitting in Congress exposing what the FBI has been doing on Ascension. So I'm just showing you how God is doing things on specific dates to show himself that he's in complete control of all of this. And then what I discovered this
Absolutely.
morning, maybe you can expand on this, but the story of Babel. What I came to discover, and I think it's in Genesis 11:5. Do you know the story of Babel? To give a quick little synopsis of why they were building it?
Yeah, I mean, well, it just seems like to me that they were coming together. God had told them to spread out over the face of the earth, and so they insisted on staying in one centralized location. And obviously, there was a lot of pagan
Yeah,
demons influencing different groups to build
this tower.
a system capital. Yeah, like
Yeah.
a system to reach heaven, to achieve, to ascend outside of the ways of God.
What I came to discover is that Pentecost was a reversal of evil's plan. God destroyed the Tower of Babel on Pentecost.
Yep.
Interesting, right? And we know that evil's on this world.
I was just going to say that you're right. He addressed the thing that caused diversity of languages is God frustrated their efforts because they were going to build a man-made system without God and in disobedience to God. And God basically says, I'll cause you not be able to do it because I'll cause you all to start speaking different languages, which will cause you to migrate to different locations and all of that. Well, on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes and they all speak with other tongues as the Spirit of God gives the utterance, but brings them into unity.
Yes. Yep.
So it's the very God always has a way to fix what man messes up, and well, we've sure done a good job of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I really come to discover how amazing all of this is, and more incredibly, how evil is ridiculously silly and foolish because they always walk into God's plan and get
Yeah.
destroyed. Just like, think about what they did. And I love this, the couple examples, what they did at Passover and Jesus. The worst day in the human history that evil could have killed Jesus was on Passover to therefore have the Passover lamb. But not only they did it, they walked into the whole plan and they did it on Pentecost. No different than Pharaoh walking into the Red Sea, walking into God's plan. See, so as much as evil is controlling the world, God's got a bigger plan, and evil, everything that we're witnessing right now, evil's literally walking into their own demise, their own destruction. God is setting them up.
Yeah. Well, you referenced Purim, which is, you literally see Haman is hung on the very gallows that he set up for someone else. And so I think that's what we're seeing with um, everything, with all of the attacks against, the former U.S. president, the one prior to the one that we're at right now.
Mhm.
And I think that many of the very things that they're trying to imprison him and persecute him for, it's like coming out, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, President Trump had some boxes. He was the president. He had the authority to declassify whatever
Yes.
as when he was president. Biden was vice president and a senator, and he had hundreds of boxes in various locations. So it's
Oh,
like,
and please give us that prophetic word because my viewers probably don't know this, but you actually had a prophetic word about the boxes And it came to pass. So give us a rundown on that one, because I find this fascinating.
Yep. The title of the prophecy was Biden, Boxes, and Billionaires. So this is in November of 2022. Chinese bribery will be exposed and their influence in American politics and even swinging the 2020 election will come to light and be undeniable. This will be tied in with the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, which will go in full exposure. I see inquiries and boxes being opened, which will reveal smoking gun secrets that will prove Chinese involvement, Chinese money involved with Biden's 2020 election. Secrets being exposed even through the courts and House of Representatives inquiries that will shock the world. Boxes, boxes, boxes full of horrible stuff. That didn't hit the news until January the 9th.
Yeah.
So, the White House is trying to keep that under wraps because remember, they invaded Mar-a-Lago in August to try to shame Donald Trump and hurt his candidates or whoever he endorsed. And they knew in early November, but they didn't release it. They didn't leak it out. And so, I share this out, and then you'd be surprised who comes knocking at your door thinking something's been leaked. That's boxes, 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 Biden and billionaires. And so that's one of the prophecies that I saw. But not just that, this is what's interesting. I want to read this one to you if I can here. This is another one, January the 6th, J6. This is November 29th. And I'll send this to you as well, the screenshot of the note.
Okay.
J6 re-examined and newfound information. This is from November. This is long before Tucker exposed it. This was long before Tucker put it out on Fox. I said January 6th will be seen as a clandestine operation from foreign money. Overseas money will be seen to have been used to influence J6 and the events, and the corruption and manipulation of the courts will even be exposed on this.
And what's the main theme? Money. You see, that there's that saying, follow the money, hush money.
Yeah.
It's always about the money, right? The money is what holds and has built Babylon, and now specifically Mystery Babylon. Revelation says, she'll be a golden cup, right? But then the world will become drunk with her. See, so United States technically was the Mystery Babylon, was Babylon, but then the world became drunk with her. So the money system, because the world reserve currency now, so they went around the world, and the whole world uses this money system. And like I showed you on the chart earlier, right? They created out of thin air and they enslave humanity. That's what's happened. No different than what happened in time of Israel and Pharaoh. Now, it's interesting because Israel was in bondage for 400 years. The Mayflower landed 400 years ago.
Yeah.
Just a coincidence.
Exactly.
Just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence.
I
got one. Earlier. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We talked earlier in the show, right? What's the most egregious thing we could do to God? Kill the creator's creation, right? So when did that happen? Well, that became law in January of 1973. Well, what also happened in 70? This is so powerful because it's the money system, right? The petro-dollar contract became law, or the contract was signed in 1973. Well, all we have to do is read scripture. Leviticus, thou shalt consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all of its inhabitants. So, should God intervene? Let's say God intervenes. When would he do it? Well, he would do it based on his scriptural word. You have to read the word, and the word says it would be at year 50. Well, interestingly, you got 400 years Mayflower, you got 50-year Jubilee, Leviticus, and you got abortion. The worst thing that we could have done to God was finally overturned as a nation, and that happened last June 24th. Interesting. But I'm telling you, that's why I really wanted to speak with you, because I find the whole thing about, as we're racing here into the end of June, how this is so important from a mathematical, biblical perspective in regard to timing, because something has to happen. Because if God does not intervene, right? If God didn't intervene at the Red Sea, would there be an Israel today? No, right?
That's
There,
very
there, there was no option. See, God intervenes when all hope is gone. All hope was gone for Israel. And it was only then when God manifest.
that's right.
And I find the correlation between Egypt and Israel fascinating. I'm sure you have had, I'm sure, prophetic words about, something biblical about to manifest. I do know that when you're on Sid Roth, you actually, what did you say about the month of July? What is it? What does that month of July represent? The seventh, what? It's a
Seventh
new
month sabbatical. Yeah.
that it's a new beginning. You actually stated too. Those were your
Yeah.
words, I think, on Sid Roth.
I've been on
So
so many interviews. I'm sorry. I forget sometimes everything
no, all
I
good.
say.
I put it down to help you out. So
Hey, let me read you one more prophecy from
please.
November of 2022. You might appreciate this one because you believe in gold and silver.
Yeah. Haggai 2, verse 8, the
Okay.
silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord.
Yep. Okay. November 2022. A continued rise of inflation and nosedive in real estate. Domestic homes and business offices will be lost. It will be a significant housing and mortgage and financial crisis, but precious metals and land will become a safer, better investment.
Beverly Hills Precious Metals Exchange is a client-focused firm devoted to assisting our clients with precious metals. Our clients range from first-time to serious coin collectors and investors seeking to add precious metals to their investment portfolios. We are not interested in volatile investments, leveraged products, and intangible assets. With rising inflation and the devaluing of the dollar hurting middle-class families, investing in gold and silver ensures protection for your hard-earned money. Save the value of your money today by investing in gold and silver at Beverly Hills Precious Metals.
Here is my slide on that. There you go. 50 to 90% collapse on real estate between now and to next summer. Real estate will flood the markets. Why?
Yep.
Because the bond system breaks. The reason homes have value because they create money out of thin air and make bonds off of those. Well, when the banks go down, there's no one making bonds anymore. So the real estate market is going to completely implode and collapse. And you're going to see an absolute flood of real estate across the entire globe. And the prices are just going to collapse, fulfilling your prophetic word. And this is what I've, put together, a few months ago already. That's what's coming. Why? Because the whole financial system is pivoted on what? This is the money system, not trillions, quadrillions of dollars are pivoting on
Yeah.
what? Gold and silver. Okay. So when this whole thing falls over, the only thing left standing is God's money, silver and gold. Haggai 2, verse 8, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. And then the United States will return to a treasury-backed dollar. Basically, we're going to go back to the gold standard in the United States. That's coming. What the second part of your prophetic word, which you stated as well, is remember the dollar's torn a third off, and then there's a 2/3 left. Well, that 2/3 is cut in half again, right? So that basically means another third is cut off. And at that time, you said earthquakes, and you also said later on they bring out a digital currency. See, so right now, as this 3.5-year bubble ends, which is right here, that's the third seal manifesting, the greatest financial event in human history. That's the first 1/3 being torn off that dollar bill. Then we run into the 3.5 years of evil, 3.5 years of the greatest glory the world has ever seen. Miraculous is about to manifest, miracles like we can't even comprehend, because Kim Clement actually stated from great darkness comes great light. And then that
Yep.
leads us into 7.5 years, 7 years forward, 3.5 and 3.5. And this then leads us into 27 years from this year, takes us into 2030. And that's the Agenda 2030. And that's when they bring on the beast system. So you said there's another tear of it. They're going to basically sign a peace treaty with Israel. So that's going to cause you've divided my land. Now I will divide yours. And then that's the collapse, the secondary collapse on the dollar and the earthquakes, and then they bring on here the digital currency. So that's the one you saw on the cell phone. So you see 1/3 here, 1/3 somewhere in here, another third, And then starting 2030 onwards into 20, somewhere in 2030, 20, whatever, in the next decade, we will see the rise of the digital dollar that you saw on the phone. And that's when, you know, the central bank digital currency takes effect. But right now, they're either trying to bring it on early right now, but they're not going to get it. Why? Because very simply, there's a couple of scriptures I can give you. Proverbs 13:22, the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. We know that hasn't happened yet. Deuteronomy, we're to be the lender to the nation. We're the head, not the tail. Well, that hasn't happened yet. So see, it's fascinating, but we know that God's not going to be mocked. And these evil people, you know, they're working for a fallen angel, but they think they're going to control the world, only to find out no different than what happened at the Red Sea, you know? It was
Yep.
great. It was looking so good. They were so arrogant. They got this. They're going to go into the Red Sea. They're going to kill Israel. They got it. And then God showed up.
So it's interesting too, because I've also, this is one of the main callings of my life. I have, our ministry is about training and developing people's prophetic gifts, and I think that this is something that's escalating. And I want to read you a prophecy. This is another one from November of 2022. I've got the timestamp. Now I'm going to read this to you. And just now, remember, we know in part, we see in part, right? So just like the prophets a lot of times would see things in the Old Testament, they would describe them as animals, or they would describe them with the language that was familiar to them, or that they would know how to describe it. But they weren't, it wasn't exactly what it was, but it represented what something was. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
I said this, 2023, I saw a hijacked airplane. Now let me stop for a minute. At the end of this, I'm going to ask you to take the word airplane out and just put in aircraft, because airplane, that's what I just thought of. So, but what, when I finish reading this, I think you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, an event that happened recently. Okay, now here it is, a hijacked airplane that will be a mystery in the skies. It will carry significant information, papers of some sort of intelligence. It will be missing and then will reappear and be missing. This is bizarre. I can't see all the details of it, but it will be a news story with these details. I saw it have something to do with going up into Canada or showing up into Canada, and China will be involved.
Yeah. Very simple answer. You know, it's the balloon we just saw.
So one word, airplane, which is
Yeah.
the language for what usually flies in the air,
Mhm.
carrying sensitive information, documents. What is that? That's the air balloon going across the state, trying to, the states started in Canada, came
Mhm.
across the states to
Yes.
gather intelligence, because, while China is having an internal revolution, they're also spreading their tentacles into the nations of the earth to try to disrupt anyway.
Yes. Yep. No, and that's why I find, I've listened to many of your prophetic words, and they're so powerful. And I know, thank God chose you to do it, and you're being a faithful servant, and you're writing it all down. And thank you. And it's truly a blessing to have that. But again, God does nothing before first speaking through the servants, the prophets. And with your prophetic word, it freaks people out because it's the truth. And when some people hear this, depending on some agencies, sometime, right, it's like it blows their mind, because God, you're not supposed to know some of these things. But
Yeah.
in the time of, just like when when Israel used to go to war, right? The prophets would actually know where to be at the right time. They would arrange everything, because ultimately there's always a victory, because it was always by the hand of God. And
Example of this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There's a
please
delay.
do.
Do you remember in August of 2020, August 10th of 2020, I was right in the middle of when COVID, right before the election, President Trump is in the White House press briefing room. He's giving a speech. It's live on national television. All the channels are carrying it. And
Yep.
if you remember, the Secret Service comes in on live TV, rushes him out. Do you happen to remember that?
I think so. Yes.
August the 10th, 2020. Well, it was because somebody outside the White House, that part of the White House, was shooting. And so the Secret Service took him out of the White House press briefing room while he was speaking on live TV. 2 days before that, I'll send you the screenshots of this so you can pull it up as well. I prophesied on social media and publicly on August 8th, 2 days before that, that to pray for President Trump, a shot would be taken at the White House and at him to pray for the safety of him and others. Also, we prophesied in June of 2021 about a once in a 100-year level hurricane that would hit the west coast of Florida that would be aimed for Tampa Bay. That happened a year and 4 months later, Hurricane Ian, which was this last October 2022. Remember, that hit Fort Myers. We sent disaster relief to help with that because the prophetic, just like an Agabus word, Agabus in the New Testament, the book of Acts, could give personal words, personal prophecies, like he did to Paul when he warned him, whoever the man who wears his cloak, if he goes, this will happen to him. But he also prophesied about a worldwide famine. So the power of the prophetic which is what is about teaching people, learning to hear the voice of God. And there are people out there that want that, or desiring that. That is the most important thing. Ministry for the individual, which is a lot of what I do. I'll give words calling out people, their sickness, diseases, telling them their dreams or whatever, secrets of the heart, but also international events so that we can be prepared and not get in fear, but stay in faith, because God always provides a Goshen for his people when the plagues are coming on Egypt.
No, that's very true, because you have to understand what I know, like Ecclesiastes, that which has been will be again. And so what I simply do is I look historically, what happened historically, and then you can kind of get an idea of how this is going to play out in our present time. And we know the story of Goshen, right? When the angel of death showed up, he passed over Goshen. He passed over Israel, but it was precision strikes. And this was the most amazing part of the strikes. There was 9 plagues, and Pharaoh's not going to turn from his wicked ways. Finally, the 10th plague, and God, the angel of death struck the one thing that Pharaoh really cared about, his son, and all of Egypt's firstborn. So he took away their most prized possession.
Yeah.
And when God intervenes, he knows how and when to strike. So all I'm saying is that, we live in biblical times, and it's, what a blessing to have prophetic word like yourself, because it gives the world comfort to know clearly that there's a God. He loves you. He loves us. He loves you, and he's got this. And everything going on in the world, yes, because there's evil on the earth, but God's always got a higher, a bigger, a taller, a better plan. And regardless of whatever evil's doing, God, it's just a perfect example. They killed Jesus on Passover, only for God to then create a miracle, and he rose on the third day. The Pharaoh and his entire army goes into the Red Sea. Talk about stupid, right? But they did. They walked right into God's plan.
That's
and
right.
Then God destroyed them. So everything going on in the world, God has got this. He's got this. And there's
Isaiah chapter,
you're not.
yeah. Isaiah chapter 60 and verse 1 says that there will come a time where darkness will cover the earth and gross darkness cover the peoples, but that there would be a remnant, that the glory of the Lord would shine and rise upon that remnant to rise up. So I think the greatest wealth transfer in history is going to happen. I think we're heading up for a jubilee. I think God is shaking everything that can be shaken, so that all that will remain will be that which is unshakable, and that's the kingdom of God. It's just an exciting time to be alive. Nobody needs to get in fear. Just be prepared. Jesus said that was the caution he gave in Matthew 24 when he answered the 3 questions of the disciples, was just to make sure that you were not taken unawares of the things that were coming. And I think that's why it's important for people to prepare.
Yes, you mentioned Matthew 24. That's one of my slides I discuss all the time. Why is Matthew 24 important? Because it says Matthew 24 is very specific, and it basically says, see to it that you are not alarmed. You know, that's the whole point. How does evil operate? He wants to scare everybody all the time. That's his mode of operation, right? He needs the fear factor, right? Because if you're scared, you give up your rights. And so you might find this interesting, but this is my slide on Matthew 24. It says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. These are the beginnings of birth pains." So if Babylon falls, think about this for a minute. If Babylon fell, then means something new has to be born. Well, when we talked about being in the 50-year Jubilee, think about this. God's pagan Rosh Hashanah, pagan's New Year, or our New Year would be January 1, but God's New Year is Rosh Hashanah, which the last one was September 25. If we are in a 50-year Jubilee, well, if we're talking birth pains, well, we know what that will be conception September 25. So let's do 9 months, June 25. So 4 days before that is the summer solstice, the day of most light. June just happens to be Pride month. Pride cometh before the fall.
Oh,
All I'm saying is that God's got this. Incredible things are right around the corner. You know in your heart something's coming. When you were on Sid Roth, you were talking about the glory is going to fill the earth, right? Let's
yep,
finish on
that's
that.
exactly.
Let's talk about the glory filling the earth, because finance is going to happen, but the finance is going to come in so big that you're not going to care about the finances anymore. Because why? Because the earth was made for God, made earth for man, and then evil came on and stole our inheritance. So the wealth transfer is a return of what was stolen from us. So we're going to get the church is going to get such abundance back that you're not going to worry about finances anymore. So what are you going to care about? The glory. So let's finish on, describe what God's spoken to you about what the glory means, and what's in your heart on that.
Well, this is my calling and mandate on my life is the equipping and training of the saints. I say the fivefold ministry of the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher. The fivefold ministry is the ministry to the saints to produce the ministry of the saints, to put them into their ministry, whether it's marketplace ministry, whatever mountain or sphere of influence it is. So that's why, here, Morning Star, I don't know if you've ever been here. We're on the old Heritage Grand Hotel, the old PTL property that Jim Baker used to have. Morning Star now owns it. We're 15 minutes south of Charlotte. We have conferences all throughout the year that address different things. And I want to connect you, by the way, with one of our leaders about, kingdom business, all that. But one of the most important things I'm doing is a school of the prophets. It's 3 days a month, and it's training people how to rise up and develop their prophetic gifts, words of knowledge, words of wisdom, prophecy, discernment, those kind of things, learning to interpret, doing prophetic activations. Starts again in September. It's people, I've had somewhere between 300 and 400 students do the course. It goes from September to May. And 90% of the people say, we have grown dramatically in revelation. That's what it's all about. It's not all about the spiritual superstars. God's bringing it into that. It's about raising up a company of people who will develop their spiritual gifts so that the glory of the Lord will come on that and on that people. And we're going to do the greater works that Jesus promised that we would do. And we're going to see a great end time army out of Joel 2. Peter prophesied on the day of Pentecost. Since we're coming up on Pentecost, he quoted from Joel 2. Joel 2 was where it says, in the last days, I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, young men in visions, old men dreams, that kind of thing. Well, there's a part of Joel 2 that Peter didn't quote. And that's the first part of it, where the sun, the moon, the stars fall, but it talks about this great army that would arise. Amen. In the earth with supernatural abilities that would be able to leap over buildings and walls. And some people think that sounds crazy, but it's why our world is so interested in Marvel and all these movies about supernatural. People they're wanting something beyond their present church experience. And that's what this is all about. It's about training and equipping people to rise up in their capacity. And that's what, MSSOP is about. That's what all of this is about, is helping people become who God's called them to be.
Amen. Amen. Jesus was very clear. It said Haggai 2, verse 9, the latter rain will be greater than the former. Well, think about that for a minute. That's just a line, okay? But think about that. The former rain was raising people from the dead. The former rain was causing, people that couldn't walk for all their life to walk. Arms were growing back. The sight was coming back. That's what the former rain was doing. Oh, wait, the latter rain is going to be greater than that? Are you kidding me?
Yep.
Superman. Why? Because the glory's upon you. And when the glory's upon you, signs and wonders, miracles,
That's right.
impossibilities. But that's where God operates, in the impossible.
Amen.
So as dark as the world is, with great darkness brings great light.
Yeah.
God will not be mocked. For what a man soweth, thus shall he reap. And so all I'm saying is that we live in historic biblical times. God has chosen incredible people to be on this, on the stage. We've got the absolute privilege, to speak with you today, Chris, to hear some of these prophetic words, because they've come to pass. Your prophecies have come to pass. You're in some of these words are freaking people out because they're so accurate, and because when you hear it, it's the truth. So, where can people find you? And so I'll include the links also below our interview as well.
Yeah. So I'm morningstarministries.org. The School of the Prophets that I was telling you about, that starts up, it's 3 days a month. It starts up in September of 2023 till May. MSSOP.com. They can find out information. They can do the training from at home or come here in person each month. We got a hotel. And then mstarevents.com. That's the different conferences where the prophetic speaks to the different 7 mountains throughout the year. We have education conference in June and just all the prophetic and worship and all that. So mstarevents.com, but the School of the Prophets is mssop.com. I encourage people to check it out. People's lives have been changed. And my YouTube channel, Chris Reed Ministries, we have a show that's also carried on different networks. It's called The Prophetic Chronicles. People can watch the testimonies of prophetic words I've given to people sitting right here. I interview them and they share, this is not knowable. You couldn't have known this about my life. It's not online. It's not on social media. This was the secret of the heart. And this is the healing. This is the deliverance. This is what God has done in my life since then. It's called Prophetic Chronicles on my YouTube channel. People might want to check it out. Or morningstartv.com. They can see all of our services.
Thank you so
I'll
much.
send those links.
Yeah, please send me the links. Everything that Chris referenced will be referenced in our description box right below the video, so you can find those links there as well too. What a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. God bless you, your
Thank
family,
you.
and thank you so much for being here.